Please join me now in welcoming our next panel to the stage, where we will be discussing this and other housing related matters. So I'd like to introduce Will Frogley from the Master Builders Association of South Australia to the stage. If you don't mind holding applause until I've introduced all six, that would be good. Will Frogley is the CEO of Master Builders SA and brings experience and qualifications in journalism, finance, business and politics, and he uses his role to represent the building and construction industry. I'd also like to invite Stephen Knight to the stage from the Housing Industry Association. Stephen has built everything from a toilet block in a cemetery to affordable housing apartment buildings, and he's picked up 27 industry awards along the way. Thank you, Stephen. I'd also like to invite Daniel Gannon, he's beat me to it, Daniel Gannon to the stage from the Property Council of South Australia. He's one of South Australia's leading and most strategic industry executives. Did you write that? I think you did. Also, Craig Holden from the State Planning Commission. Craig's career encompasses architecture, project management, construction, real estate and development. He's been a member of the State Planning Commission since November 2018 and its chair since November 2021. Also, Lee Bacon from the Local Government Association of South Australia. Lee Bacon is the Executive Director of Public Affairs at the LGA. He's led development and implementation of local government's advocacy on a broad range of issues, including infrastructure, financial stability, regional and community development, and public health and housing. And our final panellist, Anne Moroney, who is the RDA Barossa CEO and board member for Renewal SA. So she'll be able to touch on a couple of the issues there that Chris mentioned earlier, with a prior career in both private, public and commercial legal practice, and brings a commercial perspective of risk to structure. Okay, all right. You all know who Anne is. I don't need to say any more. All right, let's get underway. And we've got a little bit more time for this discussion, so let's hope we can get into a few solutions, because I don't want everyone leaving here because I think we're just talking about problems all day. We do want to try and find some solutions. Can I just ask you all, I realise this is a tough one, but what do you think is the key housing issue for our regions? And we'll start with you and we'll head down this way.
That's a big one. And as Chris, I think, rightly pointed out, there's no one solution for everyone, but the cost of building and the economics of it are critical. So I would like to see the state and private investors reconsider the design-led, mass-produced, passive housing modular model, which has been proposed before. And it's like putting a train together. You build a house with different modules for your needs at the time, and when the housing needs change, you might not have to move. You can sell off the modules and they move. If it's well designed, if it's passive in terms of climate effect, then people enjoy living in it. And you've got to build a people amenity around it, because one thing about solving the problem for today, that's an issue whether it's regions or the city, if we build ghettos, we'll have ghettos for a long time. So the people-centric need is critical. That, for me, is the big issue. Okay.
I'd be interested to get your views on that, Stephen and Daniel, when we get there. But let's head to Lee now. What do you think is the key issue for housing in our regions? And then we will get to potential solutions for these issues.
Look, quite simply, I think it's the supply of worker housing in regional South Australia. That's not new. I think regional housing has been an issue that's been bubbling away for 10 years, but we're certainly in a crisis point now. Really welcome the comments from Renewal SA to turn its gaze towards the regions that actually say that needs to move from a 7 to probably a 1 in terms of its priorities, and look forward to that conversation. But
I won't go straight to you on that, Anne. Yeah.
But also, from a state government perspective, any crisis, make the best use of that. Leaders should be running towards that fire, and we're asking the state government to take the leadership on that and use local government as an enabler and partner in that solution too. Happy to talk about that further as well.
Okay, Craig.
Thank you, Stacey. Yes, Chris articulated the issue really, really well. The answer lies in the community housing sector, the not-for-profit community housing sector, proven at Bowden, proven across the state now with the transfer of houses from the Housing Trust so they can leverage the Commonwealth Rental Assistance. That's working, that model's working. Chris may have other working models. People like Unity did 120 of them back 10 years ago in the mid-north with NRAS. There is no federal government NRAS anymore, but the answer lies in the community housing sector, who've done the hard work for years. They know how to work with communities, and that's where the answer lies.
Before we go to you, Daniel, I'll just remind everyone that has prompted me to remember there is a poll regarding NRAS in the app. So if you do want to click on the middle section, the afternoon section, there are a couple of new polls up. One is, can we fix the skills shortage in the short term? And the other one is, do you agree that we should bring back NRAS back for affordable housing in regions?
Does everyone know what NRAS is? I would assume so, but that might be worth... No?
Anyway.
Sorry? Well, no one said no.
This is the federal government housing affordability scheme where correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you guys will, the federal government would pay a certain amount of the rent. So, you subsidise it over, did you have to sign a 10-year lease?
I'm told by a number of people in the sector that they're not bringing that back. It was poorly handled. It worked well, but I wouldn't be relying on that being a model. It's down to the state government and Chris and the Minister to resolve this problem with the community housing sector.
No pressure, Chris.
Yeah.
Glad you came along.
And he's still here, so we've got another few minutes of this. Daniel?
Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, of course, to the RDA as well for inviting each of us along here today to have what I think is a really important conversation that's taking place everywhere right now. We see the problem as a housing supply crisis. And unfortunately, in my view, there's no switch that you can flick today that's going to turn the solution on tomorrow. So unfortunately, any of these solutions, Stacey, are short to medium term. But we certainly do see the solution down that supply pathway. Anne and I might have different views on densifying different parts of South Australia, but a short-term solution to the problem that we're facing certainly is in densified residential. Of course, we have to have a conversation about the role that local councils play. They should be undertaking audits of land that could be released tomorrow. And if they're not doing their job properly. I know there's 10 councils represented here today, so I do say that in the most constructive way possible, but there are blockages and red tape in the council development approval pipeline, and they've got to be removed.
Density isn't bad, in my view.
Can you use your microphone?
Just got to be designed and managed.
Yeah, that's right. Good density is very well designed. In Adelaide, we had a few problems early in the planning reform process along arterial roads like Churchill Road, possibly even Prospect Road. Fluorescent colours on the facades of buildings are never really all that pleasant, but they got through. But we have learned from some of those early bad examples, and we do think that the densification being provided today is much better than it was 5 to 8 years ago.
Stephen?
We've just touched on a few things which are really interesting, but from a building industry point of view, what we really need to know is how many houses do you need and where. And then we can work on the supply side, as you've talked about, but just reminding everybody that from a standing start to a house is 2 to 3 years, probably, in the current market. So I think we need to, if we're looking at housing, decide what problem are we trying to solve. Is it short-term accommodation for seasonal workers, medium-term accommodation for 3 to 5 year immigrants, or is it long-term, I'd say quality accommodation for doctors and lawyers and all these other professional people you need? So there's some really interesting comments about modular construction. I like that. Would be really pleased to see more about that and whether it is something that can be achieved. The good thing about modular construction is it can be moved around. So if demand crosses different areas, then maybe you've got the opportunity to move the houses on. From a capacity point of view, from the building industry, it was interesting to hear Chris's comments about 10 houses required in Tatiara. Can somebody tell me how many houses you need in Mount Gambier? I thought I'd do a bit of a survey, think tank, task force on what the builders in the region actually thought they could deliver. And it took me about 2 minutes. I rang a couple of the local builders and they told me an example, like for example in Mount Gambier, they have the capacity to build, say, another 30 houses on top of what they build now. So it now beholden to you guys to tell us, is that enough?
Okay.
And if it isn't, then, what are we going to do after that?
All right. Will, I'm interested in your answer to the question, but also your views on the modular accommodation. How would that go for master builders and the builders that you represent?
Sure, Stacey.
I think it's on.
I think definitely modular is the way of the future. It's very common already in other parts of the world. So that's definitely going to be something that's going to be a big part of our industry going forward. I think everyone had some pretty good points there. I guess the main message I'd like to convey to everyone here today is it's very important that local government and regional communities see how important building construction industry is. For many reasons, it's really the barometer of the whole community, because if building construction's strong, generally your local economy is as well. So, there was a report that came out from the ABS, and they talked about all the industries where you get the biggest bang for your buck, that famous multiplier effect. And residential construction's number 2 and commercial building's number 3. So if you've got a strong construction industry, the benefits of that will flow right through the entire economy. So that's super important. Land is obviously really important, and that's why it's so important that local government does support a strong building construction area in the regions. But the biggest challenge really right across the state right now is the labour to actually deliver on the building demand that we have at the moment, which is close to record high. Now, the perennial challenge for South Australia has been, the drain interstate, whether it's people from Adelaide moving to the big, the eastern states, Melbourne or Sydney, or it's people from the regions moving to Adelaide itself. Bernard Salt wrote a very interesting report for Master Builders about the impact that COVID had, and he said he considers it to be the biggest, seismic change since World War II. There's a lot more demand now than there has been for space. Previously, there was a big push to live as close to the city as possible. Since COVID, there's been a lot more interest in not just places like the Adelaide Hills and north and south of the city, but in the regions. And a lot of regional places are actually having positive population growth for the first time in many years. I know it varies a lot depending on the region. But that's an opportunity, and we have to capitalise on that, because we haven't had this opportunity for a long time. And how are we going to get people to stay in our regions or to come to our regions? They need affordable housing, and they need a good job.
And internet.
And internet, exactly.
We all need internet.
Community infrastructure is obviously very important as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about that too.
And Lee, I can see you.
Yeah, thanks, and great conversation. I just wanted to kind of respond from a local government perspective. Like, our members are telling us in the regions they've got the land. They've done the work, or they're doing the work as well to unlock that. They're about to kick off a process with the Planning Commission around the regional plans and how that ties together to move from anecdotes to data-driven, prospectus-based investment attraction. And I think then it's about how we move forward in a conversation to attract the construction and the investment that's needed into those regions too.
And so what happens with those plans? If they're saying we've got the land, we've got room, we've got space, where does that go? Does it sit on someone's desk?
Planning's not the problem, land supply is not the problem, it's a funding model that's the problem. As Chris alluded to, with the community housing providers, the state government, without that intervention, we'll be sitting here in 2 years' time having the same conversation.
Let's hope
Hopefully
we're
it's
not.
not forever, but it's certainly needed now.
So what's the barrier? Who is it? Housing Minister? Planning Minister?
I think that's the point. It cuts across so many
Yeah.
portfolios and so many ministers, and that's the conversation that we want to take into the
A joined
into
up
the cabinet.
solution.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it would, because you'd have housing, you'd have planning, you'd have infrastructure, you'd have social services if it's a social housing aspect of it as well.
But it's also really quickly understanding what a good intervention looks like and executing it. Might take a while to work out what the very best in the whole wide world is. But speaking of the whole wide world, this is a global problem. So we've got plenty of examples to look at and assess, and we have to do it quickly.
Craig, there's a question, I think it's directed at you from the crowd, so don't forget you can put your questions to the panel as well in the live Q&A part of the app. The food protection zone overlay is exceptionally restrictive on housing land supply and will create major problems in the near future with land shortages.
And if we use it all up, it'll create major problems in food production. So this is a balance, but yeah, every city needs its green belt. Of course, we've got a lot of housing in the part I work in, and there's room for more if we look at some of these some of these new ways of people in place, and there's scope probably for a little more, but there are a whole lot of towns really accessible in a commuter belt just the other side of that productive green belt, which needs to be taken into account too, because we don't want to wipe out the state's economy, particularly in high export sectors, by finding a quick, cheaper solution to a current crisis.
So,
both of
Stacey,
you
the
got
State
Craig
Planning
first.
Commission is about to undertake the 30-year review of Metropolitan Adelaide. And the regions, the 6 regions across South Australia.
Why is it only done every 30 years?
No, it's
It's
not.
not- it
It's
is-
done every 5 years.
We're looking ahead to 2050.
Okay, good.
And so we'll be engaging with everybody in this room, everybody in the state, about how we grow and where we grow. And we'll be coming to the community in the new year with all these different solutions that we think are possible, but the community will tell us whether they want to change the FPA boundary or the character district preservation boundaries. I suggest not. But it'll be an open conversation for everybody to participate in over the next 12 to 18 months.
How will they be able to do that?
That'll be publicly notified and you'll be deluged, and I'll be on your radio station talking about it.
Sounds good. I'll hold you to that.
But it's too late.
Okay.
But it's too late. You know, the reality is we should have been doing more about this when COVID hit. Unfortunately, none of us knew where the pandemic would take us. So this is a perfect storm of housing supply and construction problems. Supply chain blockages and constraints at the moment. Globally, the cost of building a house has gone up by 25% nationally since the pandemic hit. So there is this perfect storm of issues that has hit the housing market, and therefore it's not possible to flick the switch to provide housing tomorrow. The urban growth boundary that we spoke about earlier, that was one of John Rao's reforms from many years ago. The belief back then was to focus on providing supply closer to Adelaide rather than further from Adelaide. But Stacey, this is such a complex problem. A review of the 30-year plan is important for posterity, but it's not going to address any of the short-term problems we're facing today.
No.
All the other things will.
Stephen?
There's good work we're doing on the 30-year plan, but that's 18 months away from seeing the plan and the outcomes from that. And my take of where we are at now is we've got an immediate problem. And so this is good work for the future, but, how are we going to solve the issues we've got now? And what I think hasn't been considered, or not perhaps so far in this panel, is are we making the best use of existing housing stock? And I do go into the regions quite often, and they're all secondary towns as well as your major regional towns. And my take on it is you see half the street has vacant houses, and sometimes for a good reason. And that could be the quality of the house, how suitable it is for use. It's in private hands probably, but I would suggest that perhaps councils or somebody should do
An audit.
a review of the
So
existing
we
housing
put
stock.
this question up for GovHack. I don't know if people know a GovHack, an open source data exercise conducted by Torrens University, where teams work on open source data to find innovative solutions to problems. So one of the problems I wanted to put up was, what is the quantity and reason for vacant housing in our area? Is it any of the things you mentioned? Often it's people going into retirement homes and the house stays vacant if they stay in the retirement home for a long time. Foreign investors, interstate investors, second houses, holiday houses, all these reasons.
Airbnbs?
Yeah.
But I think it's a real opportunity for...
But the data's not there, and I think your call is good.
That is drastic market intervention. To come in and say to someone who might own a shack down on the Limestone coast that you've got to release that.
No, I'm not saying you've got to release it. I'm saying to understand the reasons why these houses are vacant and look at if there is an intervention that could incentivise people to put it on the rental market. Sometimes it will. Sometimes we don't know what it is because we don't know the reasons, or to find ways to make them more accessible. But as you were saying, that if we don't understand the scope of the problem or what some of the short-term fix options are, then we've got to put it aside. We can't use it at all.
But if I just develop my point just a little bit further, some of those houses are vacant because, for the reasons you said, people moved out. Maybe they're just not habitable under current conditions. What would it actually take to bring them up to a standard that would be suitable for seasonal workers, for example. And this is where your modular idea comes into play, I think, because if it's the bathroom or the kitchen that's substandard, can you bring in a modular package, do whatever you need to the house to make it livable, and then perhaps if it's in private hands, short-term loans for them or cheap loans. I mean, they're going to get an income from the house. They're getting nothing from it now. So if you can encourage someone to live there, some money's got to be spent on it to bring it up to a standard, then I think you could adopt that quite quickly, and that might at least solve some of your short-term problems now.
There's a comment from someone in the questions here, Jared. There's a company called X-Frame based in Tonsley that does modular construction. I hadn't heard of them, not sure if anyone else has, but that's a good tidbit. Will, I might go to you because there's also a question here from Colin Shearing. Is he in the room? Colin, hello. Timber supply and shortages. Did we ever get the timber off KI?
We did, and there is still timber going off Kangaroo and Stacey, but for me it was a real missed opportunity, something that frustrated me very deeply, because there's been a global timber shortage, as I think most people are aware. We were very fortunate to have a very substantial supply on Kangaroo Island locally. Master Builders certainly put a lot of work into. I mean, I could talk about this all day. So
let's not.
But yeah. But basically, there was enough structural timber on there to supply 10,000 homes, which is basically what we build in the whole state in a year at a time when there was a global shortage of timber. Because things were slow, and we basically gave a solution on a platter. By the time it was taken up. Crucial to it was that there was a grader that was needed to process the structural timber from a sawmill at Jamestown. They'd never processed structural timber before, but they were the only mill that really had capacity to be able to take it on. By the time all the paperwork was filled out, that grader, the second-hand grader they'd wanted to purchase from Country New South Wales, had been sold. Then buying a brand new one from overseas was a more expensive process. It was going to take longer. So we've actually had thousands of tonnes of Kangaroo Island timber just sitting in the yard at Jamestown since the start of the year, which is very frustrating to not only anyone in the industry, but anyone who's building at the moment and wants to move into their brand new home.
And there's another question on here. I think it's a dig at me. Maybe the ABC can promote regions rather than talking about Adelaide. We do try. There we go.
That really was a dig at you.
It was, yeah. I'll take it. I will also note we're one of the only TV and radio stations that have regional bureaus, and one of your RDA members has just gone down to do an interview with ABC Riverland. So we do try. Oh, he's back. There he is. David's back. So there you go. I will pass it on. Ita loves taking my calls. Can we? Oh.
I just want to say, though, as well, that COVID really highlighted the folly of Australia and South Australia being so over-reliant on materials from overseas. Now, in a country like Australia, how is it that we're importing about 20 to 25% of our structural timber? That's just absolutely ridiculous. I know the Forest Products Association is doing a lot of work to address that, but you need to be planning decades in advance because the trees need to be basically 25 to 30 years old before they're the right spot to build with. So we need to be thinking about these problems now, otherwise we're going to continue to get burnt decades ahead.
Yeah. Can we talk about density as well? It was sort of touched on earlier. Do you think that this idea of the Great Australian Dream, you know, the quarter-acre block, the backyard, the white picket fence, are we moving away from that, and are we moving away from it quick enough? We're talking about density living and maybe not 6 stories, maybe 2 stories in the regions, but if there's a good community park nearby or a garden nearby, is that the same as having a backyard?
Well, density isn't multi-storey only. I think a step forward is even row houses, you know, with common walls. A very old model, Sydney's full of them, our towns have got a lot of examples. They still have a patch at courtyard, backyard, somewhere outside, but it's a much more efficient use of space than the big yard and the big house. And they can be 2 stories and keep with the rural town vernacular really easily. What I think we have found is that old people and young people, by and large, want the same thing. They want a manageable patch and a small but real house. And it's the people in between with young families that really want the big yards. So if we don't just build the same thing for everyone, but give them fit-for-purpose choice, and I know that's a huge matching supply and demand issue there. I'm not taking it lightly. But I think there are a range of models to consider for density in regional areas that are less scary than others.
Did COVID sort of get in the way of that? It felt like we were shifting away from the backyard, and then we were stuck in lockdown for weeks on end, and everyone wanted a backyard and a balcony wasn't enough. Are we going to be able to catch up?
Yeah, there were some knee-jerk reactions to local planning policies when there was this proximity-based health pandemic that we all started to learn about. The same impact as Mark, I'm sure, would have seen was hitting migration too. So two of those policy levers, population growth and density, did experience some short-term bad PR. If you look at purpose-built student accommodation, purpose-built retirement living options, allowing people, as they enter their senior part of their life, to right-size into something that's more suitable to their ageing needs definitely speaks to that model of housing, Stacey. If I look at Mount Barker's got some of the housing that Anne was just talking about. You can walk out your backyard and look out into beautiful, uninterrupted acreage. So Mount Barker's definitely a great case study for that type of peri-urban densified living. We certainly do think that the shortest term solution to this crisis is definitely densification, but densification done well.
Yeah, it's not my turn again, I know, but in the break I was having a discussion with Craig, though, about some models I've read where you do have high density housing. It needs to be where there is aspect, so whether it's over a river, a lake, or which is usually means it's more expensive, or even a nice aspect like parks and lands, because that has a big mental well-being impact. And if we just build buildings without any thought to that, the outcomes for community won't be good. Just think that if we build them properly, that the health savings in the health budget might just fund the better housing options.
I think we'll go to Will, and then I know Lee and Stephen were trying to jump in, and Craig's been a bit quiet there in the middle, so we're coming to you, Craig, don't we?
Thanks, Stacey. Well, I think it's obvious since COVID that South Australians have a far greater appetite for space than they did previously. We've also seen things like working from home become normalised, and a lot of people want to work remotely. Again, having the right digital infrastructure is really important in the regions to be able to do that. I guess the question, and Bernard Salt, as I said, wrote a really good report on exactly this topic, but I guess the question is, and a broader question is, how long will it be until, is this a trend that's going to stay, or are we going to revert to what we were pre-COVID in a couple of years where we are having that drain interstate or to the city again? But at the moment, I think people have voted with their feet and they absolutely want the space.
I think that's been a pretty good summary, Will. Again, my intelligence from the regions, from our builders, is if you want to get houses built quickly, then you have to deal with the existing stock there by, if you need to knock them down, then this is where you've got your 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 or whatever. But the land's already created. It's not like you've got to wait 2 years for a subdivision to come along. The land will be available. So I'm not advocating for high density or even really medium density too much. It's just about reusing land that's already available for housing is going to be the quickest way to get a solution.
Lee?
I was just going to come back to this point about density. Yeah, done well. I really agree with that, whether that's the development of property itself or the livability of the region. And I think you beat me to it there. It's the question that I think will be answered or tried to be answered in the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. It's not just about development. It is about that livability space that obviously local government takes in all of its work and all of its planning that it does.
So Craig, on the 30-year plan, it'll be, you go out for consultation later this year?
Indeed, we've already started on
microphone,
the 6 regional plans.
Just the microphone. Yeah.
We've already started on the 6 regional plans, so that's underway, and we're commencing our early work on engaging with the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. So that will be a big task, and all South Australians will be participating in what the solutions are, and the kinds of conversations we've had today will be part of that. But if I could just go back to the main reason why we're all here, why isn't there housing in regional South Australia? It's a finance problem. Chris mentioned it. It's a finance problem. I've spoken to my colleagues in the community housing sector. Unity tried to get 80 houses up in the southeast 10 years ago, and it fell over because Treasury wouldn't support it. So we have a political situation where we need, I'm so pleased to hear Chris and the Board of Renewal SA are addressing this problem, because it needs finance support, and it needs the best financial model that Chris and his team can come up with the community housing sector, who are not for profit and who are there to manage and have workers' accommodation in perpetuity. So it's not mum and dad landlords owning the house and then you get kicked out. And all the housing types will all vary depending on which community you're in, and the State Planning Commission stands ready to make any changes to any zoning, temporary zonings, park zonings, whatever it will take to support the community. Our understanding thus far is there's plenty of zoned land, whether it's actually had the infrastructure to create the lots that Stephen was talking about, but therein lies the problem. So we have a market failure because of a financial problem, and the community housing sector can help solve it. They've been doing it, and they're the ones that do all the hard stuff.
So do you think that's shared equity or build to rent? I mean, if you could flick that switch tomorrow that makes land economics stack up.
It doesn't stack up in the regions.
So what sort of partnerships needed then?
So,
Sorry,
for example, I'll give you an example. So,
Yeah, I'll step down. Go for it.
the community housing sector, back when NRAS was around, they worked really hard with councils in the north. They worked really hard with government. They got some infrastructure funds that the Rudd government had around at the time. They had NRAS, which gave a 10-year tax break. That's how they got 120 houses up in the mid-north. They tried to repeat it down in the southeast. But Treasury knocked it on the head, because housing is a state problem. It's not a federal problem.
So is NRAS...
So it always defaults to the state government, and we now hear we've got a state government that has an appetite for it. That's to be commended.
Is NRAS, do we just give up on it? Is it gone? It's not coming back under a federal government, at least?
Thus far, there have been no announcements that I've read in the press to anything, unless anyone else has any greater insight. But no, that scheme, I think... was successful on many levels but failed on others. It was abused and it was poorly run, and I don't think there's any appetite to bring it back.
The NRAS worked federally because it was based on tax, personal tax, and of course the state government doesn't have that lever, so you have to see where the state government could actually step in with what kind of incentives they could offer, and things like sales, land tax, stamp duty, all those things are the levers they can pull. So there needs to be a real appetite within the government to actually work with those levers that they do have.
And just interestingly, on the NRAS poll that we've got going, 46% of you think it should be brought back, 14 say no, and 40% are still not sure. So if you haven't, get in there and have your say. Stamp duty, oh, it's up there. Well done.
Stamp duty was up there.
No, the NRAS. You just touched on stamp duty. Is that a lever that can be pulled? And it's sort of, we talk about, stamp duty exemptions and first home buyers grants, and the conversation around them is always, well, it'll push up the price. Let's go with Will first, and then we'll head down.
Stamp duty is one of the worst taxes going around. I'll put it in the same category as payroll tax, where it's completely contradictory to what we all want to see. We want to see more people employed, more homes built. Right, but governments are addicted to it because it's such a massive source of revenue. Now, just off the back of home build, I think they collected more than $900 million, more than they forecast last year through that. So governments have a hard time weaning themselves off stamp duty. In terms of housing affordability, it's my preference is, rather than grants, a stamp duty reform is a much better option, because the cost of building a home, about 40% of it's actually completely unrelated to the land or the build itself. It's all in over-regulation. We're one of the most over-regulated industries going around. A stamp duty, for a typical person now, it can save them about, if it was abolished, it would be about 20 grand off the cost of a build. It's just a hideous tax, and other states around the country are looking to either abolish it or have a broad-based model like in New South Wales, and really that's the answer, because it really is a toxic tax that's completely contradictory to what we all want to see.
So it does three things. It keeps young people out of the housing market. It discourages older South Australians from right-sizing into housing that's more suitable to their ageing needs, and it impairs labour mobility. And that's probably the big one for where we're talking today in regional South Australia. But additionally, Will, you raised the New South Wales model. Dom Perrottet has put in place an opt-in land tax model where you can pay an annual land tax on your home rather than the upfront $40,000 to $60,000 in stamp duty that you pay. Now, That takes great political will and great political courage, maybe incredible political stupidity. It's one of the two. But when you look at the way that Sydney side has lived, they've been trading their backyards in for balconies for a long time now. They might have an 80 to 100 square metre apartment. So land tax being levied on a small place like that, it's not really a huge fee. But when you're talking about bigger properties, that's when the political pain will set in. Governments are addicted to it. It is reliable state government revenue. So it's going to take a pretty courageous state government to put that one in place.
They're also very different markets, though. I was talking before about, I used to live in Sydney and I would travel to and from uni every day and it was an hour and a half each way. Whereas someone said to me, oh, you made it up from Adelaide, good of you to do the drive. And it's an hour. So we were talking about really different markets where people are buying houses in Sydney that are 2 hours from the city, and that's totally normal. Not like South Australia. We're so lucky here.
But I used to practice law in Queensland, and the model there, and I'm assuming it pertains, is that your first home had a stamp duty holiday to a reasonable amount for a modest home, and any owner-occupier was 1% flat. It didn't have the increasing scale, and that's been in operation for a long time. I know they've got more people and more houses, but even tweaking it like that, so you mightn't get rid of it. But in terms of the land tax option, didn't the Weatherall government put that?
Tom Coutson-Turner has abolished commercial stamp duty, which was affordable, relatively speaking, because it only cost $200 million to abolish commercial stamp duty, but there's at least 3 to 4 times that if you were to abolish residential. You've touched on Queensland. We're seeing a pretty draconian proposal on land tax at the moment coming out of Queensland, where Anastasia Palaszczuk is trying to tax landholders who hold land outside of Queensland. I don't even know how that's constitutional. But if that catches on around the country, that's another tax for an industry that currently pays 55% of all state government, local government rates, taxes and charges. Crazy.
So, Stacey, the reason that the community housing sector are the appropriate partners for government in the regions and building houses is they're not-for-profit and don't pay any of these taxes. No GST, none of the others. It's already there. We don't have to go and hope that all this might happen, or NRASs might happen, or stamp duty might happen. They are there, right here, right now, ready to go.
Numerous studies have shown that despite all the money the government collects from stamp duty, despite that huge amount, abolishing it would actually deliver a net gain for the state government through all the additional economic activity it would generate. Again, it takes a courageous government, but it all comes back to that multiplier effect I was talking about at the start. You get more bang for your buck from building new homes than just about anything you can do in the economy. So why are we penalising it?
We've got a question from the crowd here, anonymous, always a bit anonymous. I think it's for you, Lee, and potentially Craig. Should local governments free up restrictions to allow acreage owners to build additional houses on land without the need to subdivide? Sometimes it's not permitted, and it would take away land cost as well. Is that something that could or should be considered? Let's start with Lee and let's go to Craig.
No, I don't know if
And don't say 30-year
that.
plan.
Craig, it sounds like a local government question to the planning commission.
John might be on the line.
Yes, so subdivision of land in communities and so on is a big issue for everybody. It's a quick way to make some money for certain people.
Craig, you look to your right then. You're immediately right.
But often, for example, hobby farms and the like that are abutting a township means that the town can't grow, because once you have these large hobby farms right next to a township, it can't grow. So traditionally they've been out of favour, though the Commission is currently looking at where that might make sense in certain communities where it doesn't prevent the natural growth of a township.
And someone else has mentioned micro houses. Is this just to do with the modular housing you were talking about earlier?
No, it's a different form of modular housing, like the tiny houses, and I think that has some option for worker accommodation if it's well set up in a nice environment with some common areas. So if you think of hospitality folk in a more remote region, to have a community built around other hospitality folk or other workers working stupid hours, could work, but they've got to be well designed again. Forage Supply Co, based in the Barossa, has had a modular house designed for homeless people, a tiny house. Mm-hmm. But I think the fabulous tourism accommodation or worker housing in the right circumstances, it has a role to play, but it's not the same thing as modular housing that I spoke of.
Stephen, I saw you.
One thing we haven't really touched on is why housing is unaffordable. And that is because it's just absolutely what the cost of the land and the house is. And we've had 25 to 30% rises in construction costs, as Daniel said earlier. And the sad news, folk, is we've got lots more of those to come. And an example of that is the latest changes to the National Construction Code. I see Will's nodding his head, he's agreeing with me here. This is likely to impact on the cost of housing to the tune of $15,000 to $20,000, might be even more in the regions where costs are higher anyway. So I think we really need to have a good look at things like livability and energy efficiency, these kind of things. We all want to live in the most energy efficient house, but where's that line between what's acceptable in terms of what the absolute cost would be to build that into the home and what the long-term benefits would be? And I made a quote the other day that it's all very well having higher stringencies on energy efficiency, but if you can only afford to live in a one-star caravan, you know, what's the point? So we've got quite good levels now at 6-star.
And they just changed recently.
That's just introduced a week ago.
Yeah.
So, and that would be implemented or transitioned in the next year or so. But then the livability things as well. Anybody who has mobility issues should have a house adapted for them. There's no argument with that. But why does every house have to include a ramp up to the front door and those kind of things? These are very costly items. And I think there should be some regional dispensation here, perhaps, and just to make sure that at least we try and hold the costs where they are without introducing more and more costs. And just one point back to the stamp duty, Will made a good comment. You give them $15,000 a first home saves the ground, and then you take it straight back in stamp duty. This is ludicrous.
I just couldn't agree more with all that, Stephen, to be honest. I really call it, I mean, we've talked about how over-regulated the building industry is. And a lot of them are well-intentioned. I'm sure the NCC changes are well-intentioned, but I mean, I really call it the Christmas tree effect. You know, a lot of these changes might not seem like a big deal in isolation, but, you know, you add in 15K here, you add in 20K here, add in 20K here. With all those decorations, the tree topples over, and again, the damage to South Australia socially and economically from, I guess, dampening the housing industry is something we just don't want to cop.
But if we look at the affordability of living in a house, not just getting in the front door in the first place, these things become really important. So is there a mechanism for amortising those costs over a period of time that makes it not such a barrier? But if we can't afford to live in a house, it's not going to be a sustainable solution either in terms of rising energy costs and things like that. And I'm speaking of the passive housing. And that's where I think modular housing can offer a cost-effective solution.
In regards to stamp duty, Mark Glasbrook put up there, could stamp duty be paid once, then you'd only pay the difference between property 1 and property 2 for subsequent properties. I guess that would help investors, but it wouldn't necessarily help new people getting into the market if you still have to pay it the first time. Is that?
That's right, but at the same time, mum and dad landlords investing in property are an important contributor to supply. So it's definitely a lever that should be looked at for investors, but it certainly won't help owner-occupiers.
Lee?
Yeah, or just from a local government perspective, it's something, that stamp duty, that we've raised with the government to have a look at. We've gone down that route of suggesting alleviating it for first home buyers in regional areas. It's a direct lever.
Has anyone had
Would you
any...
cut your council rates too?
Community comment.
Not-for-profit community housing providers only pay 25% council rates.
Has anyone had any positive responses from any governments, state governments, about changes to stamp duty, or when you've raised it, because I know you have, has it sort of been brick wall?
We've produced, third-party reports from credible economists, the like. It comes down to, again, it takes a very bold government, as I think Daniel said, because even the New South Wales models that's been proposed, that's going to be fantastic for the New South Wales government overall, but it takes a short-term dip before it springboards, and I guess a lot of governments make the mistake of only thinking in terms of government rather than what will be good decades in advance.
But they've done it at the right time. When the New South Wales stamp duty projections did that, given the state of the market, But the clever part of that model was that it's opt-in. It's not mandatory. The decision's yours, whether you want to take it or not. So it kind of removes a lot of the really nasty politics out of it. So all eyes are on Perrottet.
Was there an ownership clause in that one? I remember there was a discussion about changes to stamp duty. It might not have been New South Wales, but the government would have some form of ownership, or that was first home buyers. There's nothing to do with the state government having any ownership of the property if you opt out of the stamp duty option. It was nothing like that. Okay. Probably a fee down the track, yeah. Airbnbs is something that keeps coming up on our questions here from the crowd. How much of an issue do you guys think short-term accommodation is for the regions?
Look, my attitude towards Airbnb is it's a service, but does it build strong communities? So it might help someone if they're coming in for a short term or whatever, but if people aren't living in those places regularly, are you building a strong community? And, you know, I used to live in Port Lincoln. It was a long time ago now, but, you know, I know very well that, you know, strong communities are the fabric of regional centres, and if you've got Airbnbs everywhere, is it contributing to a strong regional community? I'd say no.
There is a risk, though, like you touched on earlier, Daniel, that if you do prevent or put a cap on Airbnbs, you're interfering in a private market. And if someone has an empty house and they're going to make more money out of it as an Airbnb, why should you be able to stop them from doing that?
Yeah, look, and we hear this from the Greens all the time. You know, the Greens come to us and say, you know, we want to put a cap on rent, or, you know, we want to tax underutilised rental properties. I mean, that is drastic market intervention that won't create one further job down the line. If the answer is more tax, then we're asking the wrong question. I mean, that's certainly where we're at. But owners of Airbnb properties want revenue coming in. So if that rental revenue dries up, they'll definitely be revisiting what they're doing with the property. No doubt about it.
So it has another impact, and sometimes on more formal forms of accommodation, which they're an intervention in themselves in that. So it's like taxi drivers versus Uber, hoteliers who are highly regulated versus Airbnbs. It's a really complex issue, and I think certainly in a high tourism area it has a big impact on affordable housing or any rentals for workers. In less popular areas it probably has less of an impact. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that it's a contributor to the serious problem in popular tourism destinations.
I think we are out of time, but it looks like we've come to a conclusion. Thank you so much, all of you, for your contributions. Have we come to a solution? We're waiting
I
for
wish we had that.
Yeah, we're waiting for the 30-year plan. 18 months?
No, we're waiting for Chris Menz.
Things
and
I've
housing
taken.
providers.
Yeah,
Stacey, can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
Just finish off. Where I work is on Port Road at High Marsh, and the local council put a sign up on the medium strip, and it said, "We're consulting about our consultation policy." And I thought they must have had a think tank and a workshop and maybe consulted amongst themselves before then. And so my point really is this: let's just get on with it. I mean, this was a key point from last year, and I'd be interested to know how far we've moved forward in 12 months from what was brought up last year. So my point is, you don't have to have everything 100% perfect. You just got to get on with it.
I don't think you need to tell anyone in the room about, close your ears, local councils. Will, Stephen, Daniel, Craig, Lee and Anne, thank you so much. I think we can all agree stamp duty needs to go. Not-for-profit builders would be great. Maybe some planning changes, maybe we need to get our heads around a bit more higher density living a little bit, but not too much. All agree? All right, we fixed it. We fixed it. Done.